And I would like to invite our speaker for this session, the Managing Director of the Singapore Economic Development Board, Mr. Chng Kai Fong. Please give a big round of applause.
Hello. Yes, good to be here. So, two Singaporeans talking about Indonesia and...
what do we know, right?
Yeah, but to me what's amazing is to see the growth happening in the Indonesian ecosystem. Like, I remember I was starting out as a tech journalist 6-7 years ago, and everything was so tiny then, and now it's just grown 3 times, right? And it's going to grow 3 times more in the next few years. So tell me about yourself, Kai Fong. Like, so as a managing director of EDB, like what role, how do you come to know East Ventures and get involved in the whole scene?
Well, I met Willson at some dinner about 2 years ago, I think. And I found this character very strange because he was telling me about his investment strategy. And he said, basically, I don't need to look at the business plan. I see the founder. Sometimes I don't even need to see the founder. I pick up the phone, I call. Within, half a minute, I decide. I said, what is this crazy weirdo telling me about this? And I went to check up on him, asked a few people. I said, wow, this guy is like the seed king of Indonesia. And so I began to be more intrigued. Oh, what's happening here? You know, what's happening in his brain of his, right? And really congratulations, 10 years worth, amazing performance, and every year you see new unicorns come out of his portfolio. So I'm waiting to see what's the next 5.
And that was in which year was that?
This was just 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
And EDB has actually been really involved in the whole Indonesian ecosystem, right? With the Block 71 Jakarta, I think, and also the Nongsa Business Park. So could you talk about, like, as a Singaporean in Jakarta, like what's sort of EDB's role in supporting and collaborating with the economy?
Well, there's no need to say that from Singapore's perspective, Indonesia is one of our closest neighbors and a very important part of our economy. It's why we actually spend a lot of time in Indonesia. And I would say that we always tell even our young people, right? We say, look, you can't just start a business in Singapore for Singapore alone. You have to actually go out, venture out in the region. You have to understand Indonesia. In fact, we encourage you to learn how to speak Bahasa because you need to be able to operate in multiple areas and to connect businesses from the world who come to this region to Southeast Asia. So that's what we've been doing, actually. So we've been doing it at all levels. We even do it at I would say at the secondary school and the junior college level. We've been starting to get them more and more interested in the region. The truth is, I would say, because I can say this because I'm a Singaporean, right? The truth is, I think sometimes Singaporeans in the past, I would say, well, I only want to go, it's like my daughter. I only want to go Europe, I only want to go Japan because, it's very nice there. But I think people are beginning to understand, right, how much opportunity there is in Southeast Asia. And I would say it's not, Indonesia is the big brother, but really, I'm so happy to see Southeast Asians really traveling all around the region. And I'm very happy to see that the trade, the economy, the business is cross-ASEAN, intra-ASEAN trade is actually growing. And I think that's where the opportunity is.
And so where do you think both countries can sort of help one another? What expertise can Singaporeans bring in and vice versa?
I think it's just working together because frankly, we are still at a very infant stage. I think let's not fall in the trap of thinking that we already arrived. I was just in the US, and working together means, we're going to come together, try to build a cluster because no country can really do this alone. We've got to work together, try to attract talent from all over the world here. You can't just rely on Southeast Asian talent. You have to actually get the best of talents everywhere interested in this region, creating products for this region. You have to actually go out and get the best technologies, best engineers to come here, create products here. And that only happens when you work together. When I go to US, let's say, and that's where the heart of the innovation is, right? Frankly, people are still not looking at Southeast Asia because they think that's where product innovation, that's where the best engineers still want to go. That's where I would say they are really focused on getting the product right and all that. I think we are just beginning. I get a little bit worried when we talk as if that, this is our time in the sun. I think it's still early days. Just look at what's happening, right, with Uber, with WeWork, with Lyft. Compare their valuations with what we have now. I think we have to keep our head down and keep working and get up there.
So on the governmental level, agency level, like I know there's been quite a lot of initiatives already. Like, what are some gaps that you're seeing that where between Singapore and Indonesia, between the agencies and between the private public sector? Like, what's the next step in terms of collaboration? You think?
To me, the biggest gap is in terms of talent. We just don't have enough. Just now Willson showed the EV meter, right? 25,000, 26,000 engineers. But the truth is, we don't have enough senior product managers and engineers here, right? I hear this feedback in talking to many of the CEOs of the large tech companies, right? When they try to recruit here, they find it very difficult, partly because it's competitive, but partly because we haven't had the history, right, of building billion user type systems. We haven't had that experience. So we need your Travelocas, we need your Tokopedias to really grow. And once they have that experience in working alongside the top engineers who have built like your Stripes, who have built your Facebooks and all that, I think that's where they will learn. And hopefully you get a good exit, and then you have a mafia that you can actually propagate more startups. I think that's how the cycle has to work. So the main emphasis, if you ask me, is on talent. And we have to just work hard to tell the story that there is opportunity here. So one thing which we have been focused on, and I know many of my Southeast Asian counterparts have been doing that too, is to go all over the world, both in Silicon Valley, in Europe, and New York, and all that, and tell people about Southeast Asia. Because the truth is, many people don't know what's happening here. They still see this place as a backward place. They still see like, oh, it's very dangerous. I don't really know who I can work with here and all that. But what they don't see are the opportunities. So that's where companies, that's where startups like yourself can play a big role to help.
Is it about bringing home, say Indonesians who's been, working in the valley, or is it about just attracting the right sort of skill sets?
I mean, the background of Ferry is clear, right? That someone who's done his education in the US and then coming back, starting companies. You see the same story everywhere, whether it's in Myanmar, whether it's in Thailand, in Philippines, for example, in Vietnam. And actually, if you look at it, Southeast Asians are actually very well represented in the tech firms in the valley. So I always get quite surprised, right? I mean, apart from Indians, which are very, very successful in the tech sector in the US, actually, I see a lot more, for example, Vietnamese now in very senior product engineer positions in the valley. And I think it's not just Vietnamese. I also see Indonesians. There are also Singaporeans there. And so I think the key is to use them and to work with them, keep in contact with them, and to bring them back.
And shifting gears a bit to sort of the overall opportunity that you're seeing, from your perspective, like how have you seen Indonesia just shift and grow, and what do you think is coming next in the next few years?
Well, I think so. Indonesia's growth is always going to be there. I think you are in a really good position right now with the demographics going your way. I think it's also helped that the administration has really focused on building infrastructure, focused on getting foreign direct investments, focused on actually making this economy a business-friendly place. And I particularly love the fact that Minister Rudy, Pak Tom and all that have been working and getting involved in the community like this, because they understand that it's not just creating the next billionaires, but also working with you all to help uplift, all the self-made entrepreneurs, like the video that you saw just now. So I think everyone is very bullish about the opportunity here. Now, there are a few dangers here, of course, right? If you look at what's been happening with US-China, it is already starting to weigh on the economy. If you talk to the people who are running supply chains, for example, the ones who are manufacturing semiconductors, that demand is really coming down. So there are lots of worrying signs in the sense. You look at China, for example. China's economy is slowing down, partly because of the trade war, but partly because of some of the underlying structural issues. And that is going to weigh on the economy. And not to mention, I just talked about WeWork, I just talked about Uber and all that. So there is a certain headwind that we have to be careful about. But that said, if you look at Southeast Asia, generally we are on a path of growth. That's one reason why Temasek is so bullish on it. And it's largely because of the demographics, but also because people are now reaching the point where they're starting to consume more. It's no longer just basic necessities, right? It's about, aspirational goods.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that projections have always been revised upwards, right? Because every year we always underestimate the growth. Actually has surpassed all expectations, so that's really good to see. So in terms of EDB's role in all of this, like how should, if let's say I'm running a tech company here, or let's say I'm in Singapore wanting to expand to Indonesia and vice versa, like where does EDB come in? How can you help? And how can the collaboration sort of happen?
I think we work together as partners with you on a few fronts, right? One of them is just trying to understand what your business strategy is and trying to understand what makes sense for you in terms of helping you to grow. So for example, we know that businesses have to be in Indonesia because that's really where the action is. You have to have foot soldiers on the ground, sales distribution channels and all that. But Singapore can also play a role in terms of helping you to attract talent, helping you to build out maybe some data science engineering capabilities. So we see this as really a partnership thing. Because sometimes for talent to come from, let's say Europe, from the Valley, they often just come to Singapore first, and then after that they spend some time there, then they say, oh, there's opportunity in Indonesia, let's go to Indonesia. So we see this as, we like to look at it in broader terms, in terms of talent circulation, in terms of exchanging experiences. The more talent, the more experiences, the more startups that we can get together, I think there's greater value that will be created out of the ideas, out of working together.
And maybe could you share some examples of the collaborations with some Indonesian companies and how you guys have collaborated?
So, that's why we work very closely both with Willson and his portfolio companies. So if you look at your Fireside, or you look at, let's say, Gojek, for example, they do have some data science and engineering outfits here. So that's one way in which we work together, and it becomes win-win for both countries.
So you draw talent to say Jakarta or anywhere?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And we have a program called Global Innovation Alliance, where we actually actively send our people out. And thank you, I think a lot of you have taken interns, our students as interns in your companies. And we see this as not just helping the economy, but also really in terms of helping us understand each other better and build that Southeast Asian bond.
And talking about the broader Southeast Asia now, so obviously you're really familiar with Indonesia and Singapore, obviously. Where does the other countries come in to form this, Southeast Asian jigsaw puzzle, like Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia? How can all these countries sort of work together? If you could sketch that out.
Well, the organizing framework is ASEAN, but each individual country has their strengths. So if you look at supply chain, for example, I think Vietnam has benefited a lot from the US-China trade tensions. And I think it's because they have a very strong manufacturing base. They have a tremendous number of STEM graduates, very highly skilled. I think a lot of your companies also do DevOps there. If you look at Myanmar, it's beginning to take off as an economy. So maybe on a more informal note, right, I'd like to look at, I think we should look at countries using an indicator. I have my own personal indicator, 4 or 5 measures. So one, how crowded the flights are to the country. And obviously, Singapore, Jakarta is always full, but actually Jakarta flights are always full, which is a good sign. 2, how vibrant the nightlife is. You go out, whether you can get go out to Lorong, you sit down, whether you can get night street market, that sort of thing. So again, Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh, even Yangon, all fits that bill. 3, I like to look at how crowded the streets are. Actually, while we look at traffic jam as a problem, but actually traffic jam is a sign of a vibrant economy. And I think it's a good thing that, many of the cities in Asia, are packed full of traffic, lots of activity happening. And then the 4th and most important, how many hipster coffee joints there are, like 4 Coffee and all that. Because actually, it's a sign of affluence and consumption, but also, I think if young people are spending money, on a coffee, spending 29,000 rupiah, I saw for a coffee, yeah, instead of 5,000 rupiah or something, I think it's a good sign. It just means that the economy is on the rise and there's optimism.
So in terms of like where Indonesia will be, like what are some opportunities, like from just your broad view of that remains to be tackled? Is it like in terms of infrastructure, in terms of like, I don't know, fintech, payments? What are some gaps you're seeing?
So infrastructure, I think the administration knows it much better than I do. I would say what Rohit talked about in terms of financial inclusion, the amount of people unbanked in Indonesia just presents a lot of opportunity, because imagine if you can actually give them each a banking account and give them loans. I think that will dramatically transform the economy.
Yeah, and my last question, I guess, so any advice to, say, entrepreneurs or wanting to cross over to Singapore and vice versa, just tech companies?
Look us up, you're always welcome. Actually, don't look us up, look Willson up, and I'm sure he'll point you to the right people. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen. Please stay on stage. And now I would like to invite Mr. Batara Eto and also Mr. Taiga Matsuyama to hand over the special token of appreciation for our moderator and also our speakers. Please stay on stage. Mr. Terence, please. Okay, Mr. Batara Eto will hand over to Mr. Chng Kai Fong, and Mr. Taiga Matsuyama will hand over the special token of appreciation to our moderator, Mr. Terence Lee.
Look forward for more collaboration between EDB Singapore and Indonesia in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much.